A dying video game giant has one last chance of survival, but its own bold claims would be its undoing. Let's take a look at the Atari Jaguar.
Some of you believe your system is the most advanced in the universe. Let's review the numbers. Sega Genesis is 16 bits. 3DO is 32 bits. The Atari Jaguar is 64 bits. Which is more advanced? Clifford! 16 and 32 are less than 64. So with 64 bits, 3D graphics, real-world animation, and lightning speed that you can only get with Jaguar, which is more advanced? Clifford!
Can you repeat the question?
Jaguar! Jaguar! Jaguar!
What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of A Look At. And in today's episode of A Look At, we're going to be taking a look at the Atari Jaguar. We'll be taking a look at the history of the Jaguar, what's inside of it. Then we'll take a 360 tour of the actual console, just kind of showing you guys where like the power button is and where the controllers plug in, where the cartridge port is, that type of thing. Then we'll go ahead and plug it in and then do some gameplay to show off what kind of games the system had. And then at the end of the video, I'll go ahead and do my conclusion, just kind of giving you guys my thoughts and opinions of the system and how I thought of it way back in the good old 1990s. And in between each segment, I also go ahead and put in commercials to show you how the system was marketed back in those days as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look, guys.
To master Kazumi Ninja and to defeat the evil ninja Gyaku, you need razor-sharp reflexes, superior strength, and a really good cheat sheet with all the death moves.
Kazumi Ninja only on the 64-bit Jaguar.
Yeah!
The story of the Jaguar actually starts in the mid-1980s with four different companies: Atari, Commodore, Sinclair, and Flare Technologies. Commodore's longtime president, Jack Tramiel, jumped ship from Commodore to Atari in 1984. At this point, Tramiel focused on selling the existing inventory of Atari products and creating a new line of computers capable of competing with Apple's Macintosh, the Atari ST. In the late 1980s, Tramiel wanted to design a new series of video game consoles for Atari. This is where Sinclair and Flare Technologies comes into play. Flare Technologies was part of Sinclair, and they started designing a new computer called the Loki. Unfortunately for Flare, the Loki didn't pan out and was cancelled. Flare Technologies was headed by Martin Brennan, Ben Cheese, and John Matheson. Flare started working with Amstrad and developed a system called the Flare 1. The Flare 1 was intended to be a home computer or video game console, but the chipset was actually used in arcade game cabinets for quiz machines. Eventually, the chipset was further developed into the Connex multi-system prototype. This was also cancelled, but caught the eye of Jack Tramiel through its technological capabilities. In 1989, Jack Tramiel contacted Flare Technologies and made a deal to buy Flare Technology and turn it into part of Atari, calling it Flare 2. Tramiel asked them to create a 32-bit and 64-bit game consoles based off of the Flare 1 technology that was used in the Connex. They started work on both the 32-bit, which was the Panther, and the 64-bit Jaguar consoles. Work on the Jaguar console proved to be going a lot faster, advancing further, so the Panther project was cancelled. In 1993, the Jaguar was unveiled at the Chicago Consumer Electronics Show. Also, there was a test launch of the Jaguar, which saw all of the 20,000 units that were shipped be sold. Atari at this point thought that they had a big hit on their hands. Jaguar was launched on November 23, 1993, at a price of $249.99. Most of the games were not very popular, but there were a few games that were good. Tempest 2000, Doom, Wolfenstein 3D, Alien vs. Predator were all released in '93 as well. But as the consoles were starting to sell and people started buying and playing games, one thing came to the forefront. Gamers realized the games did not look like they were on a 64-bit system, and even as low as 16-bit, but most likely 32-bit quality. Consumers started questioning whether the Jaguar was a true 64-bit system. Atari kind of limped along for a couple years until 1995, when the arrival of the Sega Saturn and the Sony PlayStation basically sealed the final nail in the coffin for the Jaguar. But we'll take a quick pause here, and I just want to let you know that there were a few peripherals that were designed for the Jaguar, one being the Pro Controller, giving it additional buttons for fighting games. Then there was the JagLink, which was a network device to connect Jaguars together to be able to play games together. And then, in 1995, they released the Jaguar CD and memory track module. But unfortunately for Atari, this was not enough to save the Jaguar, and by late 1995, rumors started circulating that the Jaguar was going to be discontinued in April of 1996. Atari agreed to merge with JTS Incorporated, and on July 30th of that year, the merger was completed. After the merger with JTS, most of the Jaguar inventory remained unsold and was moved to a private liquidator called Tiger Software in 1996. And in 1998, JTS sold the Atari name and all of its Atari properties to Hasbro, marking the end of Atari as we all knew it after 26 years. Now, a funny tidbit of information about the Atari and JTS is that they ended up selling the console shells to a dental imaging company, where they went ahead and produced an imaging machine using the shells of the Atari Jaguar. Unfortunately, only a few of these were produced as technology changed and the company used different products. So that kind of brings us to the end of the Atari Jaguar story. However, I did want to say in 1998 the Jaguar became an open source system, and with many great homebrew games that have been made for the Jaguar. In fact, the homebrew games tend to be a little bit better than the original Jaguar games that were released by Atari. So if you ever have a chance to check out the homebrew scene on the Jaguar, it's excellent. Now, the Jaguar did not have a very long lifespan. It started in 1993 and was discontinued in 1996, selling less than 150,000 units in total, and being the very last video game console made by Atari. Well, at least the Atari that we all grew up with.
Here's Benjamin Hall on the Jaguar system to play Cybermorph. Let's see how those beastly graphics and intricate moves that only come from 64 bits of Mega Power feel. Then, Cybermorph only on Jaguar by Atari. Get bit by Jaguar.
Taking a look inside the Atari Jaguar gives us a true scope of whether it was a 64-bit or 32-bit system. So hopefully this look inside will answer the age-old question, is it truly 64-bit? So looking at the Jaguar's architecture, it has two 32-bit RISC processors that I'll talk about a little later on that are custom chips by Atari, and one is a 16-bit 68,000 Motorola CPU. Now these chips do run on a 64-bit data bus, but there is not a single chip that is actually 64 bits. So if we took the same logic that Atari did, that would make the Sega Genesis a 32-bit system instead of a 16-bit system, as the 68,000 Motorola CPU ran on a 32-bit bus in the Genesis. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the chips that are on the Jaguar's motherboard. The first two chips I'll talk about here are the Tom and Jerry chips. The Tom chip had 3 processors embedded within it. The chip itself ran at 26.59 MHz and included a graphics processing unit which had a 32-bit RISC architecture and 4 kilobytes of internal RAM. All software and coded graphics ran through this chip, and it also had additional functions for 3D operations. The next chip embedded on the Tom was the Blitter chip. What this processor does is it provides a fast way to transfer memory around the system. Real simple explanation of what it does, but I don't want to go into too much detail because it would take way too long. The last embedded chip on the Tom chip is the Object processor. This was truly the only 64-bit processor on the system, but since it was embedded on a 32-bit chip, it could only truly output in 32 bits. It converts display list into video output at scan time and provides Z buffering and shading. The last piece of technology that's embedded on the Tom chip is the DRAM controller, capable of 16, 32, and 64-bit memory management. The next chip is the Jerry chip, running at 26.59 MHz as well. This chip has one embedded processor, which was the digital signal processor. It had a 32-bit RISC architecture and 8 kilobytes of internal RAM. It was capable of producing CD quality 16-bit stereo sound and have wavetable synthesis and AM synthesis as well. Also, another function of this chip is the joystick control. So that brings us to the last processing chip on the motherboard. The Jaguar also has a Motorola 68000 system processor, which was the coprocessor to the Tom and Jerry chips. However, since development on the Tom and Jerry chips was difficult for programmers, a lot of games were produced using the 68000 Motorola chip as the main processor and using Tom and Jerry as the coprocessors. The Jaguar had 2 megabytes of DRAM. These 4 chips are the RAM chips that we're looking at now. There is one last chip I would like to talk about, and that is the EEPROM, or the ROM chip. The Jaguar had a 1 megabyte EEPROM that stored the boot up sequence for the Jaguar. Once again, this is a system ROM that kind of works like BIOS in a PC until the program on the cartridge takes over. And that's about all for the Atari Jaguar. Most of it lies embedded on 2 of the main processors, the Tom and Jerry. And to answer the age-all question, the Jaguar is only a 32-bit system running on a 64-bit data bus.
Introducing Alien vs. Predator for the 64-bit Atari Jaguar. You might not want to play it alone.
Ah!
Mom.
Alright guys, so here's the Atari Jaguar. And on the top here we have the cartridge port, the power button, and then on the front here we have our number 1 controller port and number 2 controller port. It's kind of cool to have the little Atari symbol there. On the sides there's really nothing, it's just molded plastic. On the bottom, nothing either, just kind of basically the serial number and all the goodies, FCC stuff. And on the back here we have the power jack here, and this is the DSP port. This is where the JagLink, the little modem for the Jaguar, would actually plug in. And then here we got the AV out. Here is RF out, and then the channel select switch as well. So there we go, guys. That's pretty much the Jaguar. Let's go ahead and get it all hooked up and powered up. Alright guys, so here's the Atari Jaguar hooked all back up and ready to go. So let me go ahead and hit the power button here. And cool fact is that if you have a red LED for your power, then you have an NTSC version of the Jaguar. If you have a green one, then you have a PAL version. So kind of a cool little fact there, guys. So let's go ahead and power her on. And we'll get straight into gameplay here, guys.
What on earth got a hold of this guy?
Ready, set, go!
And I say to you, my brothers and sisters, hell is a deep, dark, foul-smelling prison of the damned, filled with fire and brimstone, lost souls and demons. And how do you escape this eternal damnation? You blast the nasty pink demons right into their beady little eyes. Doom for the 64-bit Jaguar, the best Doom ever.
So that brings us to the end of the video, guys. And my thoughts and opinions of the Atari Jaguar is kind of funny because by the time the Jaguar had came out and I heard about it, it really was like, well, is Atari still making video game systems? I mean, I hadn't played an Atari video game system since the 1980s. And here we were almost into the mid-1990s, basically. And Atari was still releasing video game systems. Nobody I knew had an Atari Jaguar. Absolutely nobody. I had no friends, no family. Nobody I knew had one. And the sales of the system reflect that. I mean, it's kind of like that, unfortunately. Atari killed itself by basically touting that it was a 64-bit system when it really, truly was a 32-bit system. And once gamers bought it and saw what they had bought, it was like, well, yeah, we kind of got ripped off. And so they kind of felt that way. Now, another thing about the system, it can do amazing games. It really can. Some of the homebrew games that have been done after it became an open source system are just amazing. I mean, they're just truly amazing, the graphics and the capabilities of these games. But anyway, guys, that's kind of my thoughts and opinions. It's a system that coulda, shoulda, woulda, but eventually never did. So anyways, I wanted to thank all my subscribers and everything. And if you guys like this video, go ahead and click like and then subscribe. And don't forget to hit that little bell as well to go ahead and get notifications whenever I drop new content. All right, guys. Well, I'm out of here. Peace out.